समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
The big insight from Israel's assault on Iran is very rude, truth to tell, no insight at all. As the Islamic country with the second largest population in the Middle East after Egypt and second largest army, 5.87 lakhs, with 2 lakh reservists and thousands of ballistic missiles, is being laid to waste. Successive lines of its leadership, particularly its military leadership, being killed. It is left to fight alone, all by itself. The standout development was the immediate outrage bordering on panic when an Iranian general said on camera that Pakistan had promised that if Israel used the nukes against Iran, Pakistan will nuke Israel in retaliation. The Pakistani Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar stood up in his National Assembly to deny it, call it fake, and complain in alarm that it had even been picked up by the Daily Mail of London. He said, सब फैला रहे हैं और Daily Mail London का भी पहुंच गया है. Pakistan, he said, is a responsible nuclear state, etc., 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 blah, blah, blah. Translated into simple English, what it means is, don't be mistaken into believing that ours is some Islamic bomb. That's been a mere chant since Zulfikar Ali Bhutto floated the idea at the Islamic conference he hosted in Lahore in February 1974 and hoped to gather funds from fellow Muslim countries on that promise. What was the promise and what was the rhetoric? Bhutto was a great rhetorician. So his rhetoric was the Christian, Jewish, communist and Hindu nations have the bomb. So why shouldn't we Muslims? That was the argument. He probably suckered a bunch of Muslim rulers at that point, especially Libyan Muammar Gaddafi. Remember, that was after 1973, the Yom Kippur War and the rise in oil prices. That was after the cartelization of oil producing powers and humongous rise in oil prices. So many of these countries, Muslim countries, were flush with oil money at that point. That, in fact, is how Lahore's cricket stadium got Gaddafi's name. The Pakistanis have since been scurrying about, desperate to shed that Islamic obligation. Nobody in the world was, frankly, confused by this. Nobody in India was. It was well known that this was an India-specific program. In fact, that is the reason the Americans and others looked the other way, because they knew if they had suspected this was going to be an Islamic bomb, they would have tried to squash it as much as they are doing with the Iranians now. But they understood that Pakistani bomb was specifically directed towards India. And also, remember, it came up in an era when Pakistan was a very close ally and jihad in Afghanistan was going on. The first jihad, so-called jihad in Afghanistan was going on. And the Americans needed the Pakistanis. In fact, it's only around time the jihad was being won that Tressler Amendment and other pressure from the US Congress came in to try and cap Pakistan's nuclear weaponization. Too late by then. Over time, Pakistan has continued to repeat the mantra of Muslim unity and the Ummah while sitting quietly and watching one Islamic country after another decimated. Iraq, Libya, Syria day before yesterday, Afghanistan yesterday, and Iran today. All at the hands of nuclear weapon powers. Not only has Pakistan not gone out to help any of these out of Islamic solidarity, they've often been on the other side. They're spectacular double-cross apart in Afghanistan. They're spectacular double-cross apart. They were the stalwart allies for the Americans against the Taliban, who they are now fighting directly. So this is a boomerang that keeps going back and forth. Iran stands out in particular because Pakistan shares a 904-kilometer border with it. That's the western border. and their common view of Israel. They share their border, a long border, and also their common view of Israel, which is not that it's a legitimate country, but merely an illegitimate Zionist entity. That's how Pakistani maps display Israel. That's how Iran's maps also will display Israel. The Pakistani conduct and distancing itself from a crumbling Islamic neighbor is no surprise. It only goes to once again confirm our own thesis that there is no such thing as a pan-Islamic unity. The idea of the Ummah is a 7th century utopia, and ultimately nationalism transcends religion. Any country acts in its own national interest as it should and would never risk it for another, even if they share their religious identity. I wrote about this, in fact, in a national interest article on 11th November 2023. I am sharing the links with you with the description. Pakistan is an easy and convenient metaphor for this phenomenon. Barring pious noises and votes seeking ceasefire, at the UN, no Muslim country has risen to Iran's defense. Nobody has even bothered to send humanitarian aid, no bread, no band-aid. Not even Pakistan next door. It's one thing to say that there is no help for Russia. Iranians must do that, which Iran helped with tens of thousands of Shahed drones and artillery shells, or China, which maintains full-fledged trade and strategic ties with Iran, defying the US sanctions. Iranians could complain about that, but the most important point is zero help from any fellow Islamic country. None at all, barring words of sympathy, mostly fake, we can see, as most Gulf Arab states are happy to see the destruction of the Ayatollah's revolutionary regime. They may not want the regime to go fully, but they want it so weakened and so defanged and completely be rid of its nuclear weapons capability. It isn't even the Shia versus Sunni thing. There is no offer for help even from countries with high Shia population, as Azerbaijan 65%, or Iraq, to the extent that it matters or to the extent that it has strategic autonomy, 61 to 65%. Of course, it counts that Azerbaijan is also a big buyer of Israeli kamikaze drones. It used to take out Armenian air defenses in Nagorno-Karabakh. So there goes Islamic unity against Israel. The story of that Nagorno-Karabakh war we told you in Cut the Clutter episode of 580. We are sharing the link with you in the description today. Israel could never be as nonchalant if it had faced a united challenge on this from the Islamic world. If the Muslim world were a real political pan-national entity, it would be a force of nearly 2 billion people, or 1/4 of the world's population, and the fastest rising population in the world by religion, as the latest Pew report tells us. In comparison, Christian population is declining. Again, in comparison, Jews account for just 16 million people, 1.6 crore people, or 0.2% of global population. So this is 25% versus 0.2%. Are the Muslims largely poor and the Jews rich, and thereby there is a mismatch in their relative power? Muslims are about 25% of the global population and account for nearly 23% of the world GDP. Some of the richest countries in the world, in fact, are Islamic countries. 25% population holding 23% of the world's economy isn't insignificant. Jewish people are spread across the world, and while they lead many financial institutions and businesses, they do not secretly own the world, as conspiracy theories say. And I tell you what, those conspiracy theories are really popular. You can catch them on YouTube, WhatsApp, this and that, but those are all what they are, fake conspiracy theories. Jews in other countries identify with Israeli Jews, but even today, in major urban centers and campuses across the Western world, where much of the global wealth resides or is transacted, significant number of Jews came out in protest against the severity of Israel's response in Gaza. It may have gone down now because of Trump's pressure, but you've seen really sharp protests there. We haven't seen any such protests from Muslim groups, either about October 7, the attacks on Jews, or even over Gaza. Forget the Arab world. Not even Pakistan saw something as intense as, say, the Columbia University. Think about it. A force representing 1/4 of the world's population and economy, swearing theological solidarity, holding a bulk of the global energy, much military power, including nuclear weapons, that's Pakistan, and 150 times the Jewish population, has failed to deter Israel. If anything, Israel is able to toss it off as contempt. I know it will be said that Israel is only doing it because they have Americans as their friends. Count the number of Muslim countries who are in the American camp, and these are mostly really rich, powerful Muslim countries with modern militaries. What then is the power of the Islamic world, or what is commonly described as the Ummah, the dictionary meaning of which is the whole community of Muslims bound together by ties of religion. Translated, it means that all the Muslims of the world are united in a pan-national entity by their faith, which raises further questions. Is there such a thing as the Islamic world? Does a faith, any faith, transcend national boundaries or national sentiment? By reigniting the Middle East just when we had begun to believe it had gone into deep sleep and peace and reconciliation had broken out after the Abraham Accords, Hamas also underlined the many contradictions within and questions about the Islamic world. It led to destruction of the Assad regime in Syria. Besides of course stalling the Abraham Accords, it led to the destruction of the Assad regime in Syria, vaporizing of Hezbollah, and now the relentless pummeling of Iran. Islam is unique in that no other major faith sees itself as a pan-national entity in the loyalty, motivation, and commitment of its adherents. Christians got over it after the Crusades. There is no Christian equivalent or dream of an Ummah equivalent today. The third most numerous faith, the Hindus, might have arguments among themselves, in fact strong arguments among themselves, but only over whether their country, India, is a Hindu Rashtra or a Nehruvian secular republic. That's India's politics for you. That's the polarization in Indian politics. The Jews have only one tiny country of their own, namely Israel, which also has a sizable Arab population. The deepest contradiction within political Islam, I'm underlining that political Islam, as distinct from the faith and its practice and customs, that's apart. So the deepest contradiction in political Islam comes from the belief that religious loyalty should take precedence over nationalism, over national loyalties. The result is the Ummah fantasy. Israel is again laying it bare in Iran. The world's Muslims have set up multiple identity-based pan-national organizations. The most prominent is the OIC, or Organization of Islamic Cooperation, with its 57 members and 5 observer states. These, as we said earlier, represent 25% of the global population and 23% of the GDP. OIC's achievements are, as a collective for any common Islamic cause, zilch. They may occasionally issue a statement on Kashmir irritating India, but frankly, lately even India has stopped bothering. There's been the Arab League and some other regional organizations in Africa and Asia, but none counts on a pan-Islamic issue. An Erdogan now, a Mahathir then, and until now the Ayatollahs were taken more seriously than the OIC. Collective power is a myth. National power matters. Collective power is a myth. The only pan-national organization of Muslim nations making any impact is the Gulf Cooperation Council. And it is the most West-friendly of these Islamic clubs. 2 of its members joined the Abraham Accords, and a third, Saudi Arabia, was on its way when Hamas struck Israel and scuppered it. GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council's adversary, if anything, has been Iran. Qatar, though a member of the GCC, sits on the periphery, geographically and politically. How? I will explain. It manages its deep ties with Iran, with the US, and the most anti-Western non-state actors, the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas. And meanwhile, Israeli intelligence chiefs also can fly in and out as and when they need to do any deal fixing, particularly with Hamas. Qatar, let's simply say, place being Qatar, I watch what's happening in Iran and Israel right now on Al Jazeera these days. If we set back and look at the so-called Islamic world's history with conflict, we will find that almost all of it in the past 50 years has been within itself. We take 1973 as the cutoff because that was the last time some Muslim countries joined hands to fight a common enemy, common non-Muslim enemy, that is Israel, and that was Egypt and Syria fought together against Israel in the Yom Kippur War. But that you would expect. They had also fought Israel in 1967. Importantly this time, the Iraqis sent sizable forces. You could, however, say that all three countries, Egypt, Syria, and Iraq, were led by Ba'athist, pro-Soviet, supposedly socialist dictators. These were not still exactly Islamic powers. Pakistan also participated in this war, though. Pakistan, especially its air force, did go out to help the Jordanians, only the Jordanians. It's a question, however, if it was an act of Islamic solidarity or they were only paying back their Jordanian allies for their support in the 1971 war against India. Royal Jordanian Air Force had moved a truncated 10-plane F-104 Starfighter Squadron to fight alongside PAF. According to Royal Jordanian Air Force 9 Squadron diaries, as quoted in Fazaya, The Psyche of Pakistan Air Force by late Pushpinder Singh Chopra, Ravi Rikhe and Peter Steinemann, only 4 returned. Please see screenshots of the pages on your screen. These would most certainly account for the F-104s the IAF confirmed having shot down, while the PAF could flaunt their entire F-104 fleet minus just 2, claiming therefore that only 2 had been shot down. The rest, it follows, must have been to the Royal Jordanian Air Force's cost. Come Yom Kippur War in 1973 and the PAF was fighting alongside as comrades with Royal Jordanian Air Force. They also did quite well actually. The PAF did quite well actually in Yom Kippur War. In any case, enormously better than RJAF did fighting alongside them in the 1971 war against India. Oil-producing Muslim countries did come together with Yom Kippur War to cartelize and raise the price of oil. Never mind that it ended up benefiting them more commercially than causing much strategic damage to Israel or its American patron. Look, on the other hand, at the armed conflicts within this world. The tens of thousands of Muslim civilians killed in Gaza, including women and children, are tens of thousands too many. Contrast this with the war between the US-backed Saudi forces and Yemen's Houthis. The UK-based Campaign Against Arms Trade, caat.org.uk, in 2021 listed more than 3.77 lakh killed in this conflict, at least 1.5 lakh of them as a direct result of the fighting, all Muslims. The UNDP had projected that deaths could reach 1.3 million by 2030 if the conflict continues. Conflict continues even now, except that now it's the Americans and the Israelis who keep on going and lobbing missiles there. In the never-ending civil war in Sudan, almost 10 lakh people have died. In the last 2 decades, almost all Muslim. This includes direct combat deaths and indirect deaths from famine, disease and infrastructure collapse. 150,000 people have been killed since the conflict began on April 15, 2023. That is the latest round of conflict. And that's the minimum number, very conservative number. Nearly 4 lakh Muslims have been killed in the civil war in Syria, millions rendered refugees. Almost all the million plus killed across the Muslim world in the past decade have been killed by fellow Muslims, barring about 5,000 to 7,000 each, if that many, by the Americans and the Russians acting for the Assad regime in Syria. The AfPak region, the Mujahideen to Taliban and back, and while it is fashionable to blame the West for all the crises in the Muslim world, it was Saddam Hussein's Iraq that peremptorily occupied Kuwait. And it was Islamic powers that pleaded with the Americans to come and liberate Kuwait. Among the press corps covering that war, I was covering that war, among the press corps covering that war, there was a cruel joke. What should be the anthem of the Saudi and allied Muslim nations' armies, including elements from Pakistan? Onward Christian soldiers, because Americans it is who were doing the fighting, the Americans and the Brits and the French. Israel's unhindered, unquestioned and unchallenged assaults on Iran, a powerful nation of more than 9 crore people, among the best educated of any large Islamic country after Turkey, underlines the same cruel fact again. How a powerful community of 200 crore people, that is 2 billion people, punches so below its weight, so far below its weight. That's because it is beset with so many conflicts and contradictory national interests and priorities that it can never think or act as a collective. What's most unwise is the pan-Islamists' failure to accept that nationalism and often even ideology, look at the Baathists, even ideology. Baathists, I will tell you how this works. There was a time when Egypt, Syria and Iraq decided to become one country, United Arab Republic. In fact, in my old stamp album, I still have a page for United Arab Republic. The lesson to which we return is that nationalism and ideology are much stronger sentiments than cross-border loyalties of a shared religion.